Sorry for the short. There we are. Rules. 10:30, so we'll move on to the next meeting, which is normal business agenda. So, do we have any apologies for absence? Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest? I mean, there's the Middlesbrough Development Corporation again. Well, no, I don't. I no longer have to declare an interest in the corporation.
Item 4, Brenda and yourself for being on the interview panel. Chair.
Yes, and also the TVCA Limited accounts as STDC as a shareholder. Yeah. Given that the accounts were prepared while I was chairman, I should probably declare an interest in that.
Item 5 again, Tom and both of you and Councillor Harrison being on the interview panel. Yeah. Item 9, Councillor Brown for STDC. Item 10, Self-Chair. Item 11, Mayor Cook. Item 12, again, Councillor Brown for STDC. Item 17, 18 and 19, I propose that all local authorities declare an interest.
Thank you very much. We have my update. Well, we don't have my update. There's not much to further update. Unless anybody has any comments or questions for me, we'll move straight on to item 4. So on that, Tom, I'm going to ask you to leave, please. So people have the papers in front of them.
Sorry, Chair, is this item 5?
Yes, we're moving on to item, as we discussed before the meeting, we flipped those over, so item 5 is now item 4, but the appointment of the Chief Executive. Obviously this is largely a public paper, but you can see, and you'll have read the papers, there are various parts that are not available to the public. Obviously, as we've said before, if anybody wants to get into those items, we will have to exclude the public, and almost certainly actually all members of staff, except for Sarah as the Chief Operating Officer, who's been through that process. So happy to open it up, but first I'm just going to ask Sarah if you wouldn't mind just giving an overview of the paper, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this paper brings forward the conclusion of the recruitment of the TVCA Chief Exec appointment that Cabinet created as a post at their 31st of January meeting. So as the report sets out, we engaged Penna through a procurement exercise to assist with this recruitment. It was advertised from the 28th of March to the 22nd of April on various platforms, and Penna undertook a nationwide search as well. There was the appointment panel, which was made up of Mayor Houchin, Councillor Harrison and Mike Green, held a long listing meeting, and that was supported by Neil Schneider, who's the former Chief Exec of Stockton Council, and a representative from Penna, and Claire Winter, who's the AD for People and Operations for TVCA. They were also joined by Adele Gritton, who was a representative of the LGA panel that the authority was working with on the best value notice at the time. So a long listing meeting was held on the 29th of April. We received 19 applications were received. The result of the long listing meeting was that 5 were taken to the next stage. That next stage happened between the 29th of April and the 22nd of May, and the 5 candidates engaged in technical interviews, which were undertaken by Neil Schneider, along with a representative of Penna. They also submitted a candidate testimonial video, and they had one-to-one conversations with Mayor Houchin. The outcome of that stage was that three candidates were recommended to progress to the shortlisting stage. Shortlisting meeting was held on the 22nd of May with the previous attendees that were there at long listing. They reviewed the technical interview reports. One candidate had withdrawn ahead of that meeting. So the remaining 2 candidates were agreed as suitable to take forward to the final assessment day at that shortlisting meeting. That assessment day was undertaken on the 4th of June. There were a number of panels that met on that day, one of which was the appointment panel. They were supported by an internal panel, which was made up of Phil Forster, who's the MD of Teesside International Airport, John Barnes, the Chief Operating Officer of South Tees Development Corporation, Siobhan McArdle, who's chairing the Tees Valley Business Board, and Claire Winter. There was a stakeholder panel which comprised of Councillor Mandy Porter, who's chair of TVCA's Audit and Governance Committee, Councillor Ian Blades, who was chair of TVCA's Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and Brendan McLeish, who is a board member of Hartlepool Development Corporation. The stakeholder panel was joined by Adele Britton of the LGA, again supporting the authority in the best value notice process. And the appointments panel was also joined by Rob Whiteman, who was also supporting the authority in the best value notice process as well. So candidates were answered a series of questions, and they also delivered a presentation to the appointment panel. The internal and stakeholder panels then presented their recommendation and feedback to the appointments panel to allow it to deliberate, having been appraised of the candidate's performance at those respective panels. And the internal and stakeholder panels both arrived at the recommended candidate of Tom Bryant, and they passed that on to the appointments panel. The appointments panel then held a deliberation meeting on the 8th of June, having taken into account all of the feedback, and they also selected Tom Bryant as the preferred candidate. And therefore, the recommendation in front of Cabinet today is that they approve the appointment of Tom Bryant as the TVCA Chief Executive.
Thanks, Sarah. I think just to add, to put on record, irrespective obviously the decision process, and thank Councillor Blades as well for volunteering to be on that. Being here today, but particular thanks to Brenda, including giving up her Sunday afternoon to meet with as a panel to kind of come to a decision. So I appreciate that, Brenda. You went, yeah, although it got me out of, as I said to you, it got me out of a 1-year-old's birthday party, which I was very pleased about. There we are. Okay, we can open it up for discussion, but please be very clear on the excluded items and the restricted items. Obviously, if anybody wants to get into a conversation about those, please do ask, because we'd rather people ask those questions than didn't. But again, for transparency purposes, I'd like to keep as much in the public domain as possible, and also to be careful that there obviously are items as well that are confidential to the extent that it wouldn't mean just the exclusion of the public, but also members of staff, except for Sarah, who's obviously been, as the senior director, has been leading on the appointment process internally. Is there any comments or questions? No? Okay. Are people happy to agree with the recommendation? Yep. Brilliant. Thank you very much. We've agreed that then. Item 5? And somebody... Oh, is it? I didn't know whether he was lighting me in the hall or going back to his office. Cups at the door or something like that, trying to find out what's going on.
I'll probably run into the hill.
Second thoughts. It's too late now. It's too late now. Well, we'll just wait. We'll wait 1 second for someone to come back. If that's
not many people will do this job, you know.
Congratulations, Tom.
Thank you. Really?
Right, excellent. So we'll now go back to what was item 4, but the appointment of the Director of Inward Investment. Is it for you as well, this one, Sarah, or just ask you?
If you want me to.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I think it would be helpful to get an overview of the process.
Yeah. This report brings forward the conclusion of the recruitment process for the Director of Inward Investment and Marketing, which was created as a post again at the 31st of January Cabinet. The authority engaged the services of Penna as the recruitment agency to assist with that process. The role was advertised between the 28th of March and the 22nd of April on a variety of platforms, and Penna undertook a nationwide search as well. The 29th of April was when the long listing meeting was held. That was attended by the same appointments panel of Councillor Harrison, Mike Green, and Mayor Houchin, Tom Bryant, and also attended by Neil Schneider, the former CEO of Stockton Council, and supported by a representative of Penna. 29 applications had been received, and the result of that long listing meeting was that 9 were to be progressed to the next stage of technical interviews. Those interviews took place between the 29th of April and the 22nd of May, and the 9 candidates engaged in technical interviews, which were undertaken by Commissioner Guckin, who's the Executive Director of Place, a Liverpool City Region Combined Authority, with a Penna representative. They also did candidate testimonial video submissions, and they also had one-to-one conversations with Tom Bryant. The outcome of that stage was that 5 were recommended to progress to shortlisting stage. Shortlisting was held on the 22nd of May with the same attendees as the longlisting meeting. The technical interviews were reviewed, and there was also a second meeting with Richard McGuck in attendance on the 28th of May to further discuss the reports. Following that, it was agreed that 4 of the candidates were suitable to take forward to the final assessment day. So that assessment day was on the 4th of June, and it had the internal panel, which was Phil Forster, it was the MD of Teesside International Airport, John Barnes, who's Chief Operating Officer for STDC, and Claire Winter. The stakeholder panel, again with Councillor Mandy Porter, of Chair of TVCA Audit and Governance Committee, Councillor Ian Blades, Chair of TVCA Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and Brenda McLeish, who's Board Member for Hartlepool Development Corporation. Candidates answered a series of questions and delivered a presentation. The internal and stakeholder panels gave their feedback to that appointment panel as well. And both of those panels arrived at proposing that the appointee be Craig Peacock. The appointments panel then took all of that feedback and held a deliberation meeting, which they held on the same day of the 4th of June. And again, the appointments panel selected Craig Peacock as the preferred candidate.
Thank you, Sarah. And again, thanks to councillors and others that were involved in the process, and special thanks to Brenda for giving up a lot of time on both of these panels. It was not a light touch process. We'll open it up to any comments and questions that people have. No? Okay, people happy to approve the appointment? Yes, see nods. Yep, thank you. Very good, and then we'll move straight on then to item 6. Tom, do you want to give an overview? Sorry.
Yeah, just going to give it a double act between myself and Sarah. So I think this is the first formal cabinet we've had since we received the best value notice. I think it's important to say that from day one we fully accepted the best value notice, and we recognise and know that as an organisation we need to improve. So the first thing we did, as I think you're all aware, is we wanted to listen. So we held a whole series of workshops with obviously Cabinet, Chief Execs, but also all of our statutory committees and other senior officers from the local authorities, because we wanted to get a clear understanding of how people see us, get people's frustrations out on the table. And I want to put on record thanks to everyone who contributed to those, because I think across the board, I think all of those workshops were really well received and we got some really valuable insight. The input from those workshops has now been used to shape the plan that you've got in front of you today. We've also shared the workshop readouts as part of the Cabinet paper, because I think it's really important that people can see what was said in those workshops and then follow it through to the actual plan. The plan itself is the blueprint for how we're going to strive to improve as an organisation. We've absolutely got an aspiration for organisational excellence, but we recognise we've got a journey to go on. And I think, as we've discussed informally, we very much see this as an opportunity for a reset in terms of the combined authority and how we work. So in terms of the plan itself, it's set out under 5 sections. So we've got a statement of understanding, which is really a recognition of where we are as an organisation. Section 2 is insights from the engagement I've just talked about, but also a self-assessment from us as a combined authority. We set out our ambition in there. And then there are 5 strategic priorities, which are firstly rebuild trust and shared ownership across the combined authority. Secondly, strengthen governance, oversight and accountability. Thirdly, build a high-performing organisation with a strong operating model. Fourthly, embed a culture of continuous improvement and openness. And number 5 is deliver strategic clarity, long-term planning and prepare for the next phase of devolution. We've then got an action plan, so there's a series of actions under each of those priorities, and you'll see one of the appendices is a more detailed action plan that gives more context around timeframes, areas, etc. Also just wanted to say thanks to Middlesbrough Council, particularly to Chris and Eric and the team, because they've been really helpful in terms of feeding back their learnings from their experience, which has been really invaluable in terms of helping us to shape the plan. So that's the context. Just pass across to Sarah, who's going to pick up a little bit more of the detail.
Thanks, Tom. So as the report sets out, we've undertaken a fair bit of activity since we received the best value notice. I think Tom's already touched on all of the engagement activity that we did with various governance groups and all of the senior officers of the local authorities. Obviously we've established a dedicated team as well to oversee the implementation of the improvement plan. So, you know, myself, I've been asked to lead that team. We've created a head of improvement role, which an internal secondee has been put into, and also a programme manager as well. And we've identified some dedicated resource from finance, governance and HR. There's also, we've procured an organisational development partner as well to assist the authority on its continuous improvement journey, and that is change and transformation. So they'll be supporting us sort of longer term as well on our continuous improvement journey. I think it's also important as well just to touch on that the plan has been, you know, a number of drafts have been shared with all groups and bodies, and also the Transport Committee, Audit and Governance Committee and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee have had workshops, and they've also had statutory meetings as well, and they've been quite clear they want to own their own part in this journey too, and they all unanimously endorsed the plan to come forward to Cabinet today. The report also picks up on the independent advisory board that the report is asking the Cabinet to endorse. We were already working with what we were referring to as an independent LGA panel. We were working with them since September last year. That was as a result of the Tees Valley review. So the Best Value Notice letter asked that the authority kind of look to that LGA panel, and the chair of the LGA panel, Rob Whiteman, has been looking to strengthen that with a number of skills and capabilities as well for different members to form that into the independent advisory board. So the Cabinet will see that those members have now been proposed in the report at paragraph 21. One of them does remain confidential because it requires government approval, but that's in the confidential element of the papers. And that the proposal is that Rob Whiteman continues to chair the independent advisory board as well, because of the work that he's already been doing with the authority. The report also picks up on the terms of reference for that board, which is attached, and then the proposed reporting arrangements as well. As we move forward into implementing the plan, some bits that we've already started to pick up, as Tom referred to, things like starting to embed the portfolio holder roles, but there's much more to do. So paragraph 24 sets out the reporting arrangements for that as we go forward on this improvement journey. I think that's everything to say.
Anything else you want to add? No? Okay, we'll open it up. Has anybody any comments or questions on the report or anything that Tom or Sarah raised? Alec?
Yeah, I just want to try and understand in terms of, it's great we're going to self-assess, but what does success look like from the best value terms of notice? How is that? Are we going to be gauged or externally looked at in the say a year from now in terms of what success looks like? I just want to understand that process a little bit more, if I can, Tom or Sarah.
So I'll start, Sarah might want to come in. So in effect, Alec, the government department, MHCLG, have said that they'll be looking to the independent advisory board and our external auditor, EY, to basically give them updates on progress and give them updates on where we're at in terms of our improvement journey. We also talk directly with MHCLG colleagues as well, so we'll have regular updates with them. Obviously they've all seen the organisation improvement plan that we've put forward today, and they are, it's our plan, but they've obviously seen it and they are comfortable with it as it stands. They feel it recognises and picks up the issues that they flagged in the notice itself. So it'll be an iterative process, I think, Alec, but the two things that we'll be judged on, I think, most are by the Independent Advisory Board and EY, our statutory auditor. And obviously we'll be reporting progress into you at every Cabinet meeting. The chair of the Independent Advisory Board, Rob, will also be doing his own independent report that we'll bring into every Cabinet as well. So you'll get a readout from us as officers as to where we think we are, but also Rob in terms of where he thinks we are in his role as chair of the board.
Was there anything to say there?
Just to go on record as well, Tom, and thank you for your work over the last few months. The best value notice has been seen as a real positive, and the culture and the work on the work streams and you know, and I think me as a cabinet member feels a lot more integral in the team now, and I just thank officers and the mayor for the hard work over the last few months.
I'd like to say credit to Alec, but I think it's more Tom in the team, but that's very generous. Brenda?
Yeah, so to echo really what Alex said, I think there's been a lot of progress made. I think that we are moving forward in the right direction as an authority, as a cabinet, as a whole unit, which is why what I was referring to in the AGM is disappointing, because I think it's a bit of a step back, but I won't go on about that. But I think we do need to look forward, we do need to be working together, and I certainly feel, you know, like you do, Alec, that we are more of a group working together, and I thought the workshop was extremely useful in that we could air quite a lot of our thoughts, concerns, all sorts of things really, and I thought that it was really good. So I look forward to just keep progressing with that, and I hope that we end up with an authority that we can all absolutely be proud of.
Thanks, Brendan. Chris?
Just on the appendices where we have the sort of the different plans, the priorities, headline actions, the one thing that sort of does stick out still is that there doesn't seem to be an attribute person holding each of the actions, and one of the things that probably will get brought out is when you get to the first sort of review of where the plan's at, if any of the actions aren't on task, who then is holding it and how will they be held to account. And I think it shouldn't just rely on Tom, if I'm honest. I think that there should be a definite sort of ones of these that sit with Emma as a monitoring officer, sit with Gary respectively as finance. So I just think if there was a clearer sort of structure of where the ownership lay, that would be much better.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so there is, Sarah and the team have been doing a lot of work. In effect, every action will have an owner, and it won't just be me, it'll be obviously shared across the management team, but also, I think really importantly, we need to embed this across the organisation. So I fully recognise that this needs to be played out by all members of staff. You know, it's no good me just talking like this, or our directors. It's going to be played out by every member of staff in terms of their behaviour and actions. So there'll be absolutely clear accountability, Chris, and that'll be, as I say, embedded across the organisation.
Sorry, did somebody else have
No.
Are you referring, Tom, about the speak to truth to power sort of comment there in the officers, in terms of who is that going to be part of Rob's reports back to Cabinet in terms of the culture inside internally?
Yeah, I mean, having worked with Rob for over 6 months now, I think Rob is obviously very experienced, very astute, and I think he obviously, I know he's come and met with, I think, if not all, most of you as leaders and chief execs, and I think he's very keen to obviously keep those touch points, because obviously we'll be reporting to you as officers in terms of where we think we are, but Rob may have different views, and I think he wants to keep that relationship with you all to make sure that you've got that direct link into Rob.
Okay, in that term, speak truth to power, who's the power within that term? Is it the mayor, is it the cabinet, is it you?
Well, I think in terms of truth to power, we've talked in there, haven't we, about not just being a 1+5 = 6. So, you know, very much see Cabinet as sort of the driving force behind this. Obviously talking about strengthening the portfolio holder roles, which is absolutely fundamental to that. And so, as I say, the kind words are really appreciated, but we recognise we've got a long way to go, and we're absolutely committed to keeping this up.
Okay. Unless there's anything else, people happy to agree item 6? Yep. Thank you. Moving on then to item 6. Item 7, sorry, quarterly Q4 budget reporting and TFP. So that's over to you, isn't it, Gary?
Yes, thanks, Chair. So, as you say, this is the Q4 reports, forecasts to the end of March 2025. We'll obviously deep into the financial statements work as well for publication next week. The investment here is just over £307 million forecast investment to the end of the 24-25 financial year. The key sort of headlines within that set out in each thematic area across the tables. Table 2 at paragraph 9, we've sort of set out the movements of reprofiling schemes and projects in there, of which the most sort of takeaway points there would be the transport linked to all the CRCS1 work that the team are doing in terms of ensuring that the schemes there are delivered across the transport programme, but also In terms of the place-based ones, actually that is intentional reprofiling as local authorities maximise other time-limited sources of funding rather than the investment plan funding, because they've got requirements with government departments to meet in terms of investments. We are one element of the funding that we give to authorities in terms of their investment in the place-based area of the investment plan. They have other sources like Townsdale, other funds, etc., that have got other restrictions in terms of when they need to be spent by. So it's not unusual to see a reprofiling out of the more flexible funding that comes in later. So that's something that we would expect. So table 2 sort of sets out those movements. With the net movement is an increase of £6 million we secured at Brownfield Housing for the Brownfield Housing Fund, which was good news from the government. What I would say at a macro level is, although we've had the comprehensive spending review, we haven't had, I'm sure local authority colleagues are used to this, you have to wait a number of months before the departmental allocations come in, and then we can put them into the medium-term financial plan in terms of what that means for us. So for example, transport in your tables has still got the estimates we had before, because at the time of writing the CSR hadn't happened when we were drafting the report, and also it'll be a number of months before we actually get clarity of the detailed allocations. We have had the headline ones for transport, which was good news, which was just shy of £1 billion for CISTS 2, now renamed Transforming Cities and the Regions, if I've got that right, Alan.
Transport in City Region.
Thank you. So the rebrand in terms of the transport programme is coming forward as well. So these are things that we will incorporate as soon as we have the detail available from government through their normal processes of notifications that they make to us as well. The other points to note within the report, we have our funding areas here. We always talk about borrowing at this meeting in terms of keeping an eye on the level of borrowing and also the servicing of debt, which I'll have the Treasury report after this to talk about some more detail on that, but we track that in line with what's happening with the markets. The Bank of England have kept the interest rate at the same level in its last meeting. So our forecasts we've put in at the moment are broadly in line. And then the final point I would say is in terms of reserves, where we have a level of reserves, majority are earmarked reserves. As you slip the expenditure from one year to the next, you're slipping the funding as well in via reserves in the actual financial plans as well. So it's not unusual that you see the build-up of reserves linked to the expenditure of the projects moving between years as well. And we'll draw those down in future years as they're needed for those programmes. So probably the highlights, Chair, on that, but I'm happy to take questions on that particular report.
Right. Just I know I've asked you before on the culture and tourism, when do you foresee the settlements coming in? And we're strongly focusing on right now on the tourist offer and being a destination, so I'm really keen to know what I can ask for.
Yeah, I understand that. I think in terms of past experience, it does take a number of months to feed through. Now, ordinarily, I know we've got a September meeting, but actually it's probably more like the December budget meeting. You tend to get your information somewhere around early autumn to feed into your budget reports. Okay. So I wouldn't like to commit to September's meeting having all of the details. I think from past experience it tends to drift a little bit and you get it in time to do your budgets, and the local authorities will get the same in terms of their allocations.
And do you have an inkling whether or not it's going to be in line with previous years?
At the moment, it's difficult to tell. I've spoken to my equivalents across the country, and I think they're the same mind as me, is we have to reserve judgment until we see the detailed allocations from the departments. I think there was some headline, there's a lot of capital investment announced with the comprehensive spending review. Obviously, we're keen for revenue resources as well to come through to combined authorities, as I'm sure local authorities are as well. We're keen to see what the clarity is on that in terms of revenue funding coming through, as well as the capital schemes that we've got announced on transport.
Steve.
In the section of reserves, you mentioned about the general reserves you're reviewing at the moment. Presumably, reading the paragraph, you're thinking that should be slightly higher than currently. Is it going to be a significant increase, and is it going to be problematic? Or?
We're doing a piece of work at the moment on that, so we've alluded to that in the report, where I'm looking to look at opportunities where we can bolster our general reserves, given the level of programme we've got and the level of commercial projects we've got. I think it's sensible to not earmark everything you've got coming forward and to actually set aside an increase in general reserves. I fully expect we'll be able to do that, and so through the course of the next couple of meetings, perhaps the Cabinet, September, December, will have completed the work, at least the first bit of work on that, and be able to report back as to how we think we've been able to do that and where we think that would have a positive effect on the general reserve. And I'm talking into the sort of the millions of pounds areas with that, to see if we can increase that through the pieces of work we're undertaking at the minute, reviewing all of our projects and our activities.
Just on the spending review, Gary, there was skills and money in future skills announced in adult learning. We flatlined there, so I'm assuming is that the same scenario as the zeros?
It is, yes. Yeah.
Just to come back in on Alex's point, so obviously we've got an item later on about the local growth plan and the investment pipeline, which is where we can start to build out what those priorities are. And also obviously government have said we can't get access to an integrated settlement until we're out with the best value notice, so there's obviously a real imperative to get out of that as quickly as we can. But what I also want to do as part of the improvement plan is look at readiness for an integrated settlement. So you might have seen that West Midlands and Greater Manchester had to go through some quite rigorous readiness checks. We want to get on the front foot with that now as well, so that when we do get out the best value notice, hopefully we're in a good position to start to have that negotiation with government about getting access to an integrated settlement.
Okay, and what would be the target for you, for us to be able to have best value notice?
Well,
I don't want to show you put you in a
yeah, I mean,
there.
the short answer, Alec, is as quickly as possible, and we'll do absolutely everything within our gift to try and do that. I guess the decision is out of our hands, but all we can control is our own improvement, and we'll absolutely commit to doing everything we can to getting out of it as quickly as we can.
And when will we reassess on that then?
So the letter says it's reviewed after 12 months, but obviously there's touch points throughout that period between Rob as chair of the board and EYR auditor with government, and we obviously have touch points with government, but the letter says 12 months.
Is there any point that we can try to accelerate that with the good work that's already gone on in terms of hurrying up the settlement?
Potentially, I mean, obviously, again, the decision's out of our hand, but we're obviously going to move as quickly as we can to make the improvements in that plan.
Just on the 25/6 transfers to and from reserves, can you just talk me through why that is that amount being transferred? It's page 16, appendix C.
Thank you. Bear with me while I scroll down. Okay, thank you. So, do you mean in terms of any particular financial year, or just generally why the movements are occurring?
So 25/6, there's a 133,881 difference, which is fairly substantial.
Yeah, the majority of the movement is slippage on our capital schemes within there. So we have to slip that. I mentioned that earlier to colleagues, that we have to move the funding alongside the expenditure, slipping and underspending. So the vast majority of our movement on our capital areas and revenue areas and our revenue projects is on those schemes.
It's a fairly large amount. Is there no, I mean, some of the other places where we're seeing a fairly smallish drop in comparison, such like adult skills.
Yeah.
Is there no worth in trying to sort of do some reprofiling so that there isn't a hit on adult skills?
So some of the work we've committed to do with I've committed to do with the finance directors, and it's touched on in the feedback in the best value notice, is to look at the work on not just reporting, but some of the areas of how we sort of break this out in a bit more detail. I think what you're referring to there is there any work we can do around how we invest? Is it around how we invest our reserves?
Because essentially, rather than it just being sort of lumped in, there's a potential to make little shortfall in adult skills this year and probably next year by better use of that for a very, very small percentage of that total transfer amount.
Yeah, and one of the things we'll have to consider as part of any of those considerations is the level of how they're earmarked to schemes and what schemes, because they may well be the vast majority of our reserves is earmarked to existing schemes and schemes that have built up over time, and what we'll need to do is report back, which I'm happy to do. So here's the list, basically, that the reserves are against, and there'd be probably some trade-offs that would have to happen if that's. I'm not saying we can't do it, it's just we'd have to have a conversation about that with yourselves as Cabinet and portfolios as well.
Yeah, sorry, just keep coming back, but if the reserve levels are that high and they seem to be indicating that they're going to stay that high for all the way through to 29, is there not a worthwhileness when there's a bit of uncertainty in the budget to try and allocate that, or a small portion of that, towards making sure that we don't see a drop in funding in places where we are currently seeing that drop?
Yeah, I suppose the simple answer is it's within Cabinet's prerogative if it wants to look at what we've currently got as reserves and how we are looking to deploy them, that we can look at that.
I mean, it isn't to the extent that it's always been explained that the vast majority of the money that we have is capital. So you'd have to understand what the capital revenue split was, because you wouldn't be able to transfer capital reserves to subsidise the revenue in
That's right.
education.
That's right, yeah.
But we can't see that from those tables, so you don't know what the revenue split is to be able to talk. You know, what are the revenue reserves that are being carried that could then be brought forward, as Chris suggests? Because if that's just purely capital, then you can't reallocate that to adult education.
Yeah. And to answer the question, I'm happy to go through the detail in terms of that and go through the work on that with colleagues on that, yeah.
I think that would be useful to have a breakdown between capital and revenue for future.
I was just going to add as well, one of the new proposed portfolios is more like a corporate resource type role, which would obviously pick up this, and that portfolio holder will be able to sort of get into the nuts and bolts and obviously bring that back to Cabinet for some of those discussions.
Anything else? No? People happy to agree item 7? Straight back to you though, Gary, item 8.
Thank you. So as part of the SIT for Code, we're required to report on Treasury Management outturn performance at the end of each financial year. So this is the 2024-25 report. You've got certain elements of detail within here, but if I go through the salient points, we've got at the table at paragraph 14, we have a summary of long-term and short-term borrowing and the position at the end of March 2025, which shows total borrowing of 398 million. This is the actual borrowing we've taken out, so just for clarity on this, we have a borrowing requirement set out within our papers that will be higher than that, but because we get funding in every year from government grants, other things, and we don't necessarily spend it all in any given year, there's not a requirement always to draw down the borrowing, and we can time that from a Treasury perspective to get the best rates. So there's a difference between our requirement for borrowing and when we actually borrow within here. This is showing you in this table what we've actually entered into in terms of debt arrangements. There is also a breakdown of that position at table 2, further on in paragraph 18, in terms of what that relates to in terms of the institutions, Public Works Loans Board, and UK Infrastructure Bank, and further details about that. And then we also provide, the flip side is when we actually borrow money or enter into agreements and receive grant money from government, there's often a timing difference from a cash flow perspective when you need to spend it. So we invest any surplus overnight or into eligible counterparties at any given time to ensure that we're maximising any cash that's surplus at any one time. So at paragraph 24 in table 3, you've got some investment positions and some amounts that have been invested in different funds, to give you some examples of that. And then the rest of the report walks through what does that mean in terms of our limits. Have we complied with our limits, which we have for both borrowing and for investments that we set in our Treasury strategy through the year, and we give a breakdown of how we've done that later into the report. So that's, as I say, that's in line with SIT for Code. Pleased to report we're compliant with all our KPIs and metrics in there for the year 2024-25. But happy to take questions.
Any questions? No. I see Alec looking very pensive there.
I don't want to ask which council's led 15 million. Hey?
Sorry, what you said?
Just on the Treasury report, I was just looking at the table and it refers to 15 million lent in the short term by local authorities. I'm just wondering if I have any of that liability. Straight yes or no would.
No, these are just placements for cash flow funds between interlocal authority lending happens all the time across the country. It's just timing of when they want their cash flows and when they want to invest them or when they need them, and so that's not an unusual occurrence having local authority.
And would that probably be reflected on our budgets?
It's not so much a budgetary thing, Councillor. It's more a cash flow management point. So at any given time, I don't know, you might be waiting for a grant from government that you're expecting in Q3 and it comes in Q4, therefore you need a bit of temporary money from another local authority, and then the money comes in and then you pay it back.
I was just thinking about the liability in terms of the interest on the borrowing, whether or not that...
Yeah, there would be interest costs on your budget, but there'd also be, you may have flip sides where you're actually placing money as well during the year, so it all comes out in your budget. You'll have income receivable and income payable that you may have as a local authority that you're managing within your budget lines.
I suppose that's back to the treasury management rather than the budget paper.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's more broadly, if you're concerned, well, I'll go and check what else is going on in your treasury management. I'm sure they know what they're doing. I'm sure they know.
But yes, to the issue...
I didn't know that.
Interesting point.
Yeah.
Probably why I've not noticed it before.
It happens more regularly than you think. Yeah.
Then I think, or I should know.
Not for you as a local authority, for any local authority across the country. Nationally, it happens all the time. In fact, there's markets for it where people make it easy for local authorities to secure funds from each other.
Did not know that. Okay, anything else? Okay, we'll approve item 8. Yeah, and straight back to you, Gary, on item 9.
Yes, so the next next 3 items are in relation to post-independent review. One of the things we committed to do as part of the twice yearly reporting, once a year as part of that, would be the medium-term financial plans for each development corporation. So what you have here is the South-Tees Development Corporation's medium-term financial plan as it was taken to board at that time. So we've appended for transparency, the full report that went to the board and the information within that. We have had some discussion with statutory officers around going forward, is there a way we may be doing an exec summary of this, but clearly what we didn't want to do in the first time of reporting is not give everything to people in terms of what goes to the board. But we're more than happy to work with your finance directors and myself around how we might be able to extract out an executive summary of these medium-term financial plans as well, if it's for ease of reading, and the key features of those going forward the next time we report. For South-Tees Development Corporation and the board, they've considered all of their, as you can see, their budgets, their medium-term financial plans, like you would do as a combined authority, and then they've looked at what they have as funding sources. They have a combination of capital projects and operational schemes where they have estate management costs at the Tees Works site that are managed and income that comes in to pay for those costs as well. So generally speaking, Chair, I'd probably open it up for questions. I wasn't planning to go through the whole report that was there appended, but other than to say this is part of the consideration of ensuring that financial management and the arrangements of any development corporation and any consequential impacts or not, as the case may be, to TVCA are captured, and we're able to show how we're reporting on that.
Any comments or questions? No. Okay, we have to know the report. We'll move on to the same for item 10, Hartlepool Development Corporation, MTFP.
Yeah, so we've got Hartlepool Development Corporations here, again appended. I think the only other point I'd make on Hartlepool's is we've had some conversation with the stat officers around, we've included the full resources available to Hartlepool Development Corporation, including potential borrowing, and we've done indicative profiles across the medium-term financial plan period. Some of the discussion was around, well, why don't we just show the actual seed money that they've got for now, and then as and when a business case comes forward, show and is approved, we'll show that rather than indications of what it might be, because that in all likelihood probably won't be the profile we end up with when the business cases come forward. So I'm happy to take that on board and work with the relevant FDs about how we do that going forward, so that we get whatever the clarity is people are seeking in terms of that. But it has everything in there within the tables that went to the board, and the balance
When you say that's been shared with staff officers, who do you mean
finance directors
across all of it?
Yeah, we've had the discussions about that. Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted there.
No, it's fine. So the main bit you've got in here is this, within the report is a summary table of money in, money out effectively in terms of funding and expenditure across the medium term. In reality, it's quite early days for these development corporations, so you've got the seed money that's going in, of which, for Hartlepool, the bulk of which was on the Middle Grange shopping centre acquisition, and then the project development costs towards the master plan and the initial business cases we want to develop, working with the board on those. That's where they're at the moment.
Okay, people happy to know that report. Yeah. And then on to the Middlesbrough Development Corporation, MTFP.
So similar in terms of format and points I've mentioned earlier for Hartlepool, the difference with Middlesbrough in terms of where they're at is the majority of their seed money is on the Gresham project, now Crown Square, rebranded Crown Square. That project is with development partners and being worked up in terms of full business case activity to report into board and to TVCA around any potential transactions that will require, for that one, will require TVCA borrowing capability for that scheme when it eventually comes to pass and comes forward for consideration. So the papers you've got in front of you cover the development expenditure, the Gresham project. They get even more detail during the year in terms of how they're performing against that, in terms of the individual development budgets. But they're on track, and the last report to the Middlesbrough board on that was there was just shy of 11 million, just over 11 million pounds of investment going into that scheme in terms of developing all the business case and all the detail that goes with that for a complex scheme.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Chris?
In paragraph 3, the table just above it, it seems to be indicating that against the 24-25 budget, that there's around £200,000 of revenue that is seemingly not going to be spent. What would be the sort of the process for working out how that can be spent, or what that could be allocated on?
Is this in the board appendix?
Page 2.
Yeah.
Yes, appendix 1.
Appendix 1, yeah. So the process of that's board budgets, so that will be for the Middlesbrough Development Corporation board to consider what's happening with those budgets across the medium term.
Okay. Is it possible, sort of for future iterations, for that to be made a bit more clear what available cash flow is and what restrictions are placed on it? Because obviously there's the investment zone money, which is sat there at 0% allocated. But actually, if there's restrictions on it that can't be used for XXX, then we need to sort of be aware of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, we can do that.
Just a broader point or question, Gary. The best value notes having an impact on future years and our ability to work the budget and work the numbers in terms of what I need to come here and sort of lobby for. But does that trickle down into the 3 development corporations, or are they all autonomous from our budgetary planning in the coming years?
So I think a couple of points, quite a few points in there, but I think generally speaking, in respect of the best value notice, when we look at an integrated settlement, things that Tom's talked about earlier, the way I describe it is the sort of size of the cake that's coming to any deep devolved area across the country shouldn't be, what was said is they're not going to detriment people through that process. It's more the fact that access to the flexibilities integrated settlement brings to how you slice that and how you can move things around and how you have flexibility of capital revenue in between years and things like that. As a devolved area would be the things you get with integrated settlement. Now, obviously, that's caveated with how do the physical monies come through to each devolved area compared to other areas, because you never really get to see a comparison of that. In terms of specifics to your own development corporations, you've got your own constitution, your own budget, you've got your own resources that you manage and govern as a board. It's only to the extent of any relationship that you want that is there with TVCA in the future, to the extent there was any funding coming through TVCA to the development corporations, it'd be a process. All of the governance around our constitutions at both TVCA level and development corporation from a financial perspective, we already are quite well versed in how they work, in terms of how the money works, and how that comes forward and how things are approved. So the simple answer is you have your own sphere.
The specific is that each development corporation is a standalone public body, as defined by the review. So with your STVC hat on, you would see TVCA as a funder, and so the relationship from a TVCA point of view is one of a lender. And so when we sat around this table, we would be analysing it through the prism of, we have lent money to Middlesbrough Development Corporation, STVC or Hartlepool. How is that lending being used? You know, is it being used or is it being sat? Where is the money being distributed? Is it being distributed effectively? Is it grant? Is it loan? Is it equity? So we would in effect be looking at that as through a lending prism. But from a budgetary standpoint, those two things are separate. unless TVCA has lent money to one of the development corporations, but it's through that prism that TVCA. So a specific example is Gresham, for instance. You've got Middlesbrough Development Corporation, in fact, had seed money of £10 million to get on and develop business cases like Gresham, which it's been spending. At some point, that is going to come to TVCA and say, as a lender, we would like to borrow the money from you to fund that project in some form. And so those budgets are completely separate. But if that was to be approved and that was to happen, which may or may not happen because it would be for TVCA to decide, then there would be crossover between those two budgets because TVCA would have to reflect the money it's lent and Middlesbrough Development Corporation would have to reflect the money it's borrowed and how those two things interact.
So it's the broader answer then, yes, it will have a sort of an impact in the short term.
The impact on what? What do you mean on it? Sorry.
Just the best value and the length of time we're in that, whether or not. I mean, there's numbers in our budget that we have to baseline at zero because we don't know. So again, just
I differentiate between some of the forecasts across these MTFPs and these reports apply. All local authorities won't know their full allocations yet with government post CSR because it takes time to come through. So that we're not alone in terms of that process for that. Your question was around would the best value notice process or what we're going through affect how money flows?
Or the length of time we're in that process?
Yeah. And what I guess I'm saying is the funding you've already got and the budgets and medium-term financial plans you've already got are based on pre-existing resources and things that have been approved and approvals that have already happened and that have been locked in as part of all the previous governance arrangements. Any new money coming forward.
And that's why I'm really sort of asking the question from with the SDDT hat on, so years 27, 28.
But that would still go through our existing governance constitutional processes that we've got for how money gets approved by Cabinet and how it flows between organisations, so the extent that it needs
so I think the short answer is it won't affect it because the BVM would be more looking at financial resilience, capacity and capability rather than the actual cash flows between as decided by this Cabinet.
See, I'm a Labour man, completely understand that rather.
Feedback's a gift.
You're too technical.
I think what an integrated settlement gives you, Alec, is flexibility. So picking up on Chris's point earlier about it gives you more opportunity to move money around rather than getting in ring-fence pots from specific government departments. But we haven't, it's not stopping us getting money, so obviously we've just got the transport money, same as the other combined authorities, but we haven't got the ability in terms of flexibility to move money around as much as we would have with an integrated settlement.
But just as a point of clarification on that, it also has, because which is slightly odd from the government process. So the government gave us, or formally confirmed whatever it was, the £978 million, but there was also money available through the Department of Science and Technology. There were £30 million pots given to established combined authority areas, which is a nuanced point. We were not given that £30 million because we're in a best value notice. So there's also a bit of an oddity in government that they're happy to give us £1 billion, but apparently we can't be trusted with £30 million because we're in a best value notice. So there are going to be some oddities where we might miss out on small pots of money because we're in the best value notice. And that is a demonstration of one pot. Now, thankfully it didn't have an impact on the transport pot, which is much more fundamental and much more substantial from all of the fundamental infrastructure we're trying to put in across the region. But I think anybody sat here suggesting that in the next 6 or 12 months there aren't going to be pots of money that we might miss out on and would not be correct in saying that. Okay.
So,
Brenda?
can I just ask, so when we come out of best value notice, will we get that money that we haven't got?
No. And there's also
we've lost it.
There's also, yes, exactly, and there's also at the moment the process also specifically says that you have to wait 18 months. Once you've finished the best value notice and you're out of it, there's a lag of 18 months before you can get the integrated settlement. Now, to be fair, other combined authority areas are also challenging this at the minute, and Tom is right that we should prepare ourselves for the integrated settlement to show that if we've been through the best value notice and government are happy that our processes, etc., are to a standard, there is no logical reason to wait 18 months. So if we're also ready for the integrated settlement and we reach that benchmark, then there is an argument to say that we shouldn't have to wait the 18 months after that. But that at the moment...
So what you're saying is it's 2.5 years before I can come back and resolve for some tourism money?
As of the, well, from a flexibility point of view, there's a 2.5 year wait before we can get to integrated settlement. Now, I think there is some work to be done that could reduce that down, but as of today, that's the case. Okay, we'll note, I mean, we went around the houses there with the Middlesbrough Development Corporation financial plan. We'll note MDC, MTFT, and then we've got the report and the update from the Tees Works annual accounts, item 12, which is just taken as read, or is there anything else you want to add?
I think this was one of the recommendations from the independent reviewers to report back the Tees Works position to the Cabinet. Only thing I would say is this has already been reported to South Tees Development Corporation Board as the shareholder within Tees Works Limited, so the board have already been through the accounts and the reporting process and the discussions there, which you would expect as a shareholder. But we did agree to bring this back to the Cabinet as well for completeness, and that's what we're doing here, and providing the details of the performance and the key elements around how dividends work and how the process works there as well.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Any comments or questions? No? Okay, well, we'll note that report and we'll move on to item 13, the transport update.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's the usual update report for Cabinet in relation to the capital investment programme. A couple of things to highlight, I think, in the recommendations include details of all the schemes that we expect to progress through business case in the next kind of reported period, so that's by the end of September. A large number of schemes now reaching that kind of stage, including some that we've discussed previously at Cabinet, including resolving the footbridge issue at South Bank, which is good to be able to progress that, and also we think we're very close to being able to unlock the issues with the A689, A19 Wynyard kind of improvements, so significant progress on those. I think the other key elements to highlight are around, obviously, it's already been mentioned, the confirmation of funding for the future funding, which is for 2026-27, a small amount of money coming forward, and then the bulk of that from 27-28 through to 2031-32. That really enables us to further develop and deliver the projects that we've highlighted and been agreed by Cabinet in Jan 24, and obviously the details of each of those projects is set out in the appendix to this report. And obviously as part of that, a lot of work is now taking place with officers in the local authorities and key stakeholders to progress each of those schemes. And that's really good time.
Good time, thank you. Go on.
I know we've had a conversation on this. You know what I'm going to ask you for. When can I go back to the residents in South Bank and tell them there's going to be a usable footbridge at the train station?
So we just got the last bit of detail to do, but I understand work will start not this weekend but the following weekend, and then there's about 4 weeks of work to do over there to get that new footbridge up and running.
So we're talking around towards the end of summer?
And end of July, mid-August is kind of where I would be kind of saying at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, absolutely imminent. We've been able to kind of sort that detail and get that ready to go, recognising the kind of challenges that has been causing.
Thank you all.
Brenda?
Thanks. So I notice in the Hartlepool bits that there are several places that are going to have a route from the town centre to various places, more outlying. Can I just ask, will these last and will they be robust? Because they've been there before and were taken away. And I'm just a little concerned about them being put in and then stopping again.
Thanks. I think all of the schemes have been worked through with local authority officers over a number of kind of weeks and months to kind of get to this stage, and particularly the ones, if you're referring to the ones that are going into delivery in the next stage,
yes,
were very much kind of highlighted right the way back. So when we secured the Levelling Up Fund about 3 years ago, these were very much schemes that were driven by kind of local authority colleagues and officers
Yes,
has been the absolute priority.
Yes.
So yeah, you know, that is all kind of laid out in the business case work that we're kind of doing.
So my worry, Alan, is that the bus company will say, which they've done before, will say these are not being used properly, so they'll stop them.
Yeah, there is a process which is the kind of traffic regulation order process, which we're in the middle of at the moment. Obviously, all led by yourselves as the local authorities, where they have an opportunity to kind of express their views object to those schemes. But if that decision is made through the TRO process to proceed, there is no statutory process in which they can kind of object to that. Obviously, there is they can kind of lobby, but there is no statutory requirement to shrink back from that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris?
Two really. So the UTM, where are we at with that? Because I'm struggling to find that, if I'm honest. And then the projects that are on hold, such as the Tees Flex, what is the understanding around that? Because it seems to indicate that it can't have capital used for the purpose that we were predicting it to be used for. So
in terms of the UTMC, so this is, as you probably know, as kind of legal authority for Middlesbrough, this is the kind of traffic signals, the smart tech kind of work that you host on behalf of the whole of Tees Valley. So this is about kind of investing in that opportunity to upgrade, make our road network more kind of efficient. So all that investment is taking place and is proposed, will come forward in a short period. For example, some really innovative trialling things have kind of happened in the last month that were actually recognised in the government's artificial intelligent transport strategy, which is about how we use kind of really smart technology to keep buses on track and on time. So some really good things happening there. Obviously there's more work to do in that regard moving forward, and it should be detailed in the digital power if I can find the appropriate page, but more than happy to talk in more detail about that directly if appropriate.
It's just that when it was originally proposed, it was said that the burden for the funding of it would be taken away from local authorities, and one of the dates that for full implementation anticipated by the end of June 2025, which is obviously Monday. So I'm just a bit nervous that that seems to not be referenced anymore.
So there's two elements in that. There is the implementation of the capital investment, which is obviously what we're doing, and there is a commitment that won't have any revenue implications on you as the local authority. So e.g. if we're putting more equipment in, there won't be a kind of ongoing maintenance. So I think that's where the burden point has been kind of made, that in installing and paying the capital costs, that we don't expect any kind of revenue to come, operating costs increase on the local authority. So.
Does that mean that there'll still be the existing revenue that's already applied to the UTMC will continue from the local authority level?
That's the assumption at the moment. That's what we're kind of working through. There's obviously, because it's kind of traffic signals kind of maintenance work, it's a kind of core highway maintenance kind of element.
What do you mean by that?
So because effectively the local authorities don't have a traffic signals function, they pay into Middlesbrough as the kind of lead authority to do that work on their behalf.
And the Tees Flex capital?
Oh, sorry, Tees Flex. So Tees Flex capital, so the allocation was made on the basis of that there might be some work to do on a model where we bought the buses and then that reduced the revenue cost. Obviously with capital, we have significant amounts of capital, less revenue. So that was the model we were pursuing, and that was before the BSIP funding came in place. Obviously the BSIP funding as revenue, that's the kind of model that we've pursued with the kind of work and the extension through 25-26. And when we've started to explore that a little bit more, there's a bit more work to do on that as a model, but there doesn't seem to be significant amount of kind of saving by actually owning and operating the buses, and actually owning the buses and then having a kind of operator commission to use them. Doesn't look like that's working as a kind of model, but we've got a bit more work to do on that at the moment.
Can I just ask you a little bit about the active travel. I'm being parochial in my own ward, so I apologise. This actually came up with full council yesterday. We've got a great lengths along that path where we put it in the past around off-road motorbikes. Now, once you've finished your works, does it incorporate the infrastructure in terms of what potentially that could create, like a rat run for these off-road motorbikes, or does that fall back on? Or I'm assuming, hopefully, your counterpart of the council around that conversation about future-proofing it and not making it a rat run?
Yeah, so all the conversations have taken place with officers on those kind of implications, and officers have been pains to point out some of the challenges that you've had on other routes and trying to make sure that we can avoid that as kind of best possible in creating that kind of routes.
So the infrastructure and types of barriers is built into the
if that's what's desired. I know there's different views. There's views about kind of putting barriers in to stop vehicles going through, but then there's the counter argument to that is about the accessibility for people who need to kind of get through those.
The arguments you have about the distance between those barriers.
Well,
that's all.
Yeah, that's all been dealt with officers on.
Well, because that's been co-designed with Alex officers.
Okay.
Absolutely, and in kind of when we get to the process, obviously in terms of the final approval for those schemes, again, there's that kind of ongoing dialogue.
It's just so I can communicate with the residents, because their immediate gut reaction is that we're creating another rat run for the motorbikes.
Understood.
Anything else, Ryan? No? Okay, we'll note that, thank you, I appreciate that. We'll move on to item 14. Councillor Blaze, thanks for coming to this item. How do you want to present it, Ian, or or is it Up to you, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll take the report as read, obviously, but the committee has undertaken a detailed investigation and it asked the Cabinet basically to consider the 3 recommendations in the report.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add to those 3 recommendations?
No, well, I think they're quite detailed, the recommendations, so.
Okay, thank you. We'll open it up. Has anybody any comments or questions for Councillor Blades and the recommendations? Might get away lightly here, Ian. No? Okay. So on consideration of those, how did the Cabinet want to proceed? The Cabinet want to agree with recommendations in the ONS report? Yep. Okay, we can agree with those. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
If you wouldn't mind passing on our thanks to the ONS committee for the work that's been done on that, it'd be much appreciated.
Thank you.
And then on to item 15, local growth plan and investment pipeline. So over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Chair. So we've talked about this previously. This is a vital piece of work because this is going to be the ambitious 10-year plan that in effect builds on what we've already started to drive inclusive growth. So it's absolutely imperative we get it right. You'll see in there, we've touched on this earlier, we also need to develop an investment pipeline to deliver on that plan, and that's not only about public investment but how we also attract private investment into the region. And then that pipeline will be used to inform our next investment plan. So this is almost like a placeholder to tell you where we're up to. I think we've now got sessions in the diary with each of you where Steph and the team will be coming along to talk to you about what you'd like to see in there to make sure that this is absolutely owned by Cabinet and you see everything that you want to see in there. Steph's here if you've got any more detailed questions.
Sorry, Steph, is there anything you want to add to that before we open it up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My own. So just like to say, obviously, throughout this process, we've been working closely with officers within all of your local authority areas. We've just this morning had the most recent local growth plan working group, where we're obviously setting out and just looking very detailed at how we're going to take forward the next few months of wider partner and stakeholder engagement, which is obviously the next big phase of work to do. Just to assure everybody, there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes to develop a really significant and robust evidence base. We are absolutely embedded to having a local growth plan that is underpinned by evidence, really highlights the strengths of the Tees Valley that we can take forward, but also is cognizant of the challenges that we have. But we have a real opportunity to both maximise our opportunities and address our challenges through this piece of work and the interdependent piece of work of the Get Tees Valley Working Plan.
Sorry, Steph, on the working group this morning, who sits on that?
So that is nominated local authority officers from each of, Tees Valley Management Group and Chief Execs nominated local authority officers from each of the 5 local authorities to work with us, and we also have representatives from what used to be the Cities and Local Growth Unit of Government, which has now been separated back out into Department for Business and Trade and MHCLG, who are the lead unit for the local growth plan. So we have officers from those 2 departments who sit with us on that working group as well.
Thank you. Just to check, I assume all leaders are aware of who your lead is?
Mine's left.
Yours is just left. Well, if we wouldn't mind, Steph, I don't know who we can do it through, but can we make sure we just share just in an email an overview of who's on that so that leaders know who their named representative is? So obviously, as well as having direct interaction with us as the organisation, those one-to-ones that Tom says have been set up, it would be helpful to know that they can link in with their officer to make sure that they're on the same page at a local authority level as well.
Absolutely, Chair. We spoke to officers this morning about exactly that, and making sure that obviously the Chief Execs were briefed and we could feed in obviously anything that you need in those one-to-ones.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, we try. We try.
I just want to slightly contradict that a little bit, because through Andrew Carter and Louise Anderson have been really integral into feeding into this, and I just wanted to thank the good work in terms of agreeing our area growth plan has been really empowered by the conversations we've been had, and some of the work I've been able to get done in the short term or like coming. My question though, Steph, is based more around a little bit about the budgetary constraints with the best value. Sorry to take us back there, but again, this is a 10-year plan, and how is that impacting in terms of where we can, as an authority, sort of agreeing where we're going? I mean, we're talking about holistic growth, or I mean, I'm just wondering how and when we can really sort of get to the say 27, 28, and how that's impacting.
Do you mind just bringing it a bit closer to
I don't think it's on, is it?
Yeah, it's on.
Says it is. Can you hear me now? Speak up. Oh, sorry, can you hear me
It's
now?
softly spoken on, Fred. Steph, you might have to speak up a bit.
Sorry, can everybody hear me now? So I think obviously as part of the work that we need to do, I mean, recognising that this is about maximising both existing investment opportunities that we have, but also about attracting new investment opportunities. Yeah. And I think to interact with obviously announcements in the spending review and the recent industrial strategy, part of what we would need to do through the growth plan is to look at both private and public sector investment over the longer term. We are also, again, looking to maximise the existing funds that we have, and as Tom mentioned earlier, the fact that we are not currently in a position to access an integrated settlement does not mean that we are not still receiving funding through programmes and other revenue sources that we have. I think this is about bringing together what we currently have collectively, both ourselves at a local level. We are going to be looking at also a sort of monitoring and evaluation framework around this, so looking at the impact of what we can do. So I think that is all part of the next phase of work.
I mean, my question.
Sorry, just to add to that, Alec. I think from a strategic level, the idea of the growth plan is starting with, well, not quite a blank piece of paper, but starting with what do we want for the region from an inclusive growth perspective. You've got those priority sectors, but you've got that everyday economy that we talk about. How do we make sure people improve? We've then got a budget that sits against that, some things that are already funded, allocations that are there that are a bit vague. We know there are allocations to it, but then there's a stretch target of how do we go and secure future funds to fill in the rest of that pipeline as well. So
the what won't be in that question is obviously mine's only a 4-year term, and I was just wondering without the numbers in the budget to be able to concrete some of these growth. My figure is in 2 or 3 years' time there's a whole different makeup in Redcar and Cleveland Council, and some of this stuff never materialises because we couldn't put numbers next to the you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a fair point, Alec. I think I guess just to reassure that we're not going to constrain our ambition by a best value notice or what funding.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
And it's absolutely about us as a region getting on the front foot and demonstrating what our ambition is, and then it's about using all of our collective leverage abilities to say to government and others and private investors these are the opportunities in the Tees Valley, and this is why you need to come and invest in the Tees Valley, because the opportunities and the return will be so great.
But I also think to that last point you made, I suppose, as with anything in a democracy, local or national, a change of local authority or a change of cabinet and a change of mayor could envisage a change of priority. I suppose what I would look back on is our original investment plan from 2019 that has stood the test of time with significant changes that we've seen in local government over that time period. And actually, one of the things that's been consistent all the way throughout was the investment plan. So irrespective of who was sat around this table politically, we've seen that didn't get blown off course, and the reason that didn't get blown off course, and actually I think this plan will be much better than our original investment plan, is going to Steph's point that it'll be much more evidence-based. So the idea we can get people across the political spectrum bought in, so that if there are any changes, disagreements across that, but if we can agree the fundamentals in the growth plan, if we do it right, it should survive. We can't promise, but it should survive any political turmoil that might happen.
Yeah, I was being provoking and selfish rather than a critique of...
No, but I think hopefully, if nothing, give confidence to the fact that the original investment plan has stood the test of time with those changes. Mike?
Yeah, just wanted to come in on a technical point as well. Sound myself and switch on. Can you hear me? Yeah. Just a bit of a technical point, because I was involved in some of the initial conversation with the central government about the growth plan, the workshop. And just building on Tom's point that actually there's two elements to this, isn't it? It's important that we get sustainability in terms of our integrated settlement, so we know where we stand and moving out best value. But equally part of the function of the combined authorities having a growth strategy that is a two-way process, so making sure that each of the component local authorities' growth plans and investment plans are reflected in the regional one, but vice versa. And in the comprehensive spending review, there's a number of funding streams that were announced, which would be outside of the traditional funding streams that come into the combined authority, but we can access as local authorities. And I suppose it's just making sure that our regional work joins up, because there are other funding streams available, whether it be housing funding, whether it be infrastructure funding, whether the Mayor mentioned commercial funding. It kind of gives us a set, the strategy should be our set piece around what it means to invest in the Tees Valley and how each of the authorities fit together. So I wouldn't want members to think that the only game in town is the integrated settlement. There are wider funding streams available that we should be able to drive collective support for.
Okay. If there's nothing else, people are happy to agree. Item 15. Yeah. I'm pleased to hear that we've got all what we wanted now, which will help with that. So thank you, Steph. Item 16. The Tees Valley Working Plan. Is it back to you? Is it Steph? Sarah, it's back to Steph.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, as we've just touched on there, another integral part linked to the local growth plan is the Tees Valley Working Plan. This plan came about through the DWP publication of the Get Britain Working White Paper. The government has an overarching ambition to achieve an 80% employment rate by 2035, and underpinned with that for all local areas to develop local Get Britain working plans. And for Tees Valley, we have been asked to brand that as Get Tees Valley Working Plan. Ultimately, this is about bringing together the work, health and skills agenda, and this is about looking at systemic change around those three core component parts, which are really important in moving more people who are currently economically inactive into work, and primarily who are economically inactive due to long-term health conditions. So this is about us working closely very much with our local authority partners, the North East and North Cumbria Integrated Care Board, and our local DWP and Job Centre colleagues. There is a formal requirement for the plan to be developed under a formal partnership, and the membership of the Education Employment Skills Advisory Group has been widened to include membership of the North East and North Cumbria Integrated Care Board, which then means the Education Employment Skills Advisory Group meets the formal requirements of that local partnership group. Work has been underway since the publication of the guidance, which was in April, and this report sets out the template, which is defined as Annex C, which is our overview of our initial proposals for the plan, which we are, subject to Cabinet approval, required to submit to DWP today. And then further work will progress to have a plan which will focus in the first instance on economic inactivity for September.
Any comments or questions on the proposals? No? Okay. People are happy to agree that? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks again, staff. And then we're on to item 17, a little skills update. So for you now, Sarah. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. So this paper's to note, so we'll take it as read, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Short, sweet. No, there you are.
No, it's not a question, it's just a comment. I hope you know that Red Carrot Cleveland's reaching good Ofsted reporting for adult learning.
Absolutely, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll note that paper. Have a good plug there, Alec. I'd like to see it, like to see it. And then moving on to Connect to Work item 18. Is that back to you, Sarah?
Yeah, just bear with me, I'm just correct page number. So this paper sets out and provides an update on the development of the Connect to Work programme. I think some is to note, but we are asking for some approvals today as well. So we're asking if Cabinet is happy to accept the programme of 17.7 million into the investment plan as a specific grant. So it's quite described how we need to spend this, right down to the actual specific delivery. So we accept it or we don't. And approves the mixed model of delivery. So the team's done a lot of work, working really closely with officers from each local authority to determine the best delivery partners for this, and we are proposing that is definitely our local authorities, but actually the local authorities are telling us that they may need to procure some quite specific expertise. So the options are set out in the paper. And the recommended option is that we go with a mixed model of delivery, so that's local authorities delivering, but they are able to procure specialist support. And the final request is that if that is approved, that it can be delegated to the TVCA Chief Executive in consultation with our statutory officers to take the necessary actions and get that moving.
Just to ask, you said it's extremely prescribed. By who?
DWP.
Right, so we've had to work within a very prescriptive model.
Absolutely, and it is, I think nationally it's proving challenging, and you know, we'd like to be in a position to launch the programme in autumn of this year, but we are going through quite an intense core development period with DWP, and guidance does change, so that's the position.
Yeah. Diplomatically put. Any comments or questions to Sarah on that?
Approve the recommendations.
Yeah. Can we approve the recommendations and also the delegations as well?
Yeah.
I've never seen such an enthusiastic get. Yeah.
We're in progress, Chair.
I think it's probably worth noting that the assurance framework specifically refers to specific grants, which is why that's noted in the recommendation. So it then aligns it with our assurance framework.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's out in the paper, no problem. Okay, on to item 19. Back to you then, I assume, Sarah.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So again, this is quite a detailed paper, so I might just provide a quick summary and then just talk you through the two kind of decisions that we're looking for. So at the Cabinet meeting in March, as part of the investment plan refresh, we started this conversation specifically around the UK Shared Prosperity funding, but actually what Cabinet agreed at that time was that we would undertake a review of how we're delivering our business growth service. And actually this is a national issue that it currently can be quite fragmented, quite difficult for businesses to understand. Certainly the work that we've been doing, Steph's team have been doing on the industrial strategy, there's a real focus from government on those top sectors, but actually 86% of our workforce are employed in all of the other sectors within our economy, which I think I prefer to describe as foundation economy rather than everyday economy. So actually what we've done, we've undertaken quite a lot of work and looked at quite a lot of evidence and spoken to quite a lot of people. So this paper proposes a new model, so a new way of working, which hopes to achieve providing more support, providing support to more businesses, but actually that ranges from light touch, quite universal support, which is also businesses need, right down to targeted, really defined programmes where we'll invest a little bit more but get more return, right down to a really targeted, recruited offer where we develop a real relationship with that business because they've got really high growth potential. So I think it isn't just a conversation about UK SPF funding, it's a conversation about a strategic approach, and any funding that comes in the future could be slotted into this, but would certainly need to follow the necessary funding approvals. So that was a question I received recently. So I think the recommendations are, well, there's two decisions that we're asking for. One is that Cabinet approves the moving to this new model. And Cabinet has three options: to approve the new model, not to approve it, or to approve parts of it, actually. And then the second decision relates directly to UK SPF allocation that we have for this financial year. We are in Q2 of this financial year, and what we have tried to do is make recommendations for activity which is in line with the new model, so we're moving to the new model, and there's a selection of things in there. So again, asking Cabinet to approve all, none or some of that UK SPF expenditure this year.
Just as the Cabinet member for this, and just want to applaud that new culture. I think I've been meeting with Sarah every 2 weeks and feeding into this, so I'd absolutely recommend that the Cabinet accepts the entirety of the plan, and thank you for your hard work, and you and Chris as well. I'm sure there's other people to thank for our big
team effort, but thank you, Councillor.
That's what called them young as well.
We also thanks for the work you put into it, Annick, as well. It's been helpful guidance to the team to be able to get to where we've got to. Any other comments or questions? People happy to agree the recommendation to adopt the model? Yep. And the financial allocation as well? Yep. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that, Sarah. We have the delegate decisions. We'll take them as read unless there's anything you want to pick out to those, Anna? No? If anybody's got any comments or questions on those? No? Okay. If not, we'll note that. The date and time of the next meeting is blank because hopefully you've seen that was in the AGM papers and we've sent that out for the last 12 months. And on that we'll close the meeting, but if we could ask for, if you wouldn't mind, Chief Execs and Leaders to stay behind once everybody else has left, that'd be good. Thank you.